Saturnastra, chapter 24. The birthday party. Artsy shook his head and he neighed, and then he trotted back to the manor. And he went inside the birdcage, and the dragons inside suddenly stopped flying, and they gracefully landed on the beaks on top of the roofs of their chicken houses. And their senses told them that he was about to do something interesting. And the way they were standing still, that he was reminiscent of the birds. And at that moment, a figure came inside from the other entrance, and he was greatly perturbed by the dragon's behavior. And he saw that their behavior had something to do with his presence, and fearing another massacre, he decided to come back after he had left. And unlike most of our kind, he liked to transform slowly, and we could easily change forms in the blink of an eye, and he reveled in the sensation of changing. And you could almost say he took pleasure in the reaction his metamorphosis caused. And whenever he had a large crowd, he would show off, and with a healthy crowd of 500 little dragons, he was truly in a good mood. And the lad hunched to stand on all fours, and his back then took an unnatural arc, which was soon followed by his stretching his head forward, and slowly his bones made strange cracking noises as his body internally started taking the anatomy of a dragon. And his mouth opened wide, showing all of his sharp teeth, and his head too became enlarged and redder, and even the white of his eye was now the color red, and his curly long hair solidified into a mane which ran down his back, and he grew in size and length, and the length of the clothing was torn by the strain, and with a tail and all, his half-transformed body was reminiscent of Mordred, and his mouth and nose had protruded forward to give him the visage of a dragon, and in the final stage of the metamorphosis, he grew brown, copper-colored scales. And his favorite dragon form was a male version of Flaminga, and Flaminga's DNA made him rather small, and aside from the odd change, he had not grown much, and accounting the tail, he was as long as a full-grown adult human. And unlike his skin, he had overgrown wings. And he looked at the ground and gingerly picked up the letters, and then he tied them to his head using a string, and from the tattered clothing. And when he felt that the letters were secure, he ran outside, and then he leaped out to take flight. And in imitation of the messenger dragon, his large wings split and flapped faster than the wings of a hummingbird. And he hovered over the barn for a few minutes, and he was scanning for the location of the other people he had to invite to the party. And the little pudgy dragons flew around, and the sight of among a tiny swarm was rather frightful, and up in the barrel the berserkers had stopped their training to look up at the spectacle. And one of the berserkers asked Gross, "Dr. Gross, do you think they're going to attack?" "Not really. The shell is no different than birds, and relax, man. Nothing bad will happen if we just sit here and enjoy the show," said Gross with disdain. And eventually he made up his mind, and he flew in the direction of the rising sun, and the world around him streaked past him as he gathered more speed. And after flying around the world thrice, he finally felt like landing in his destination. And he was much more disappointed to notice that the dragons had been unable to match his speed, and the place that he visited was a frosted mountain in the north of Saturnastra, and the snow made visibility difficult, and from time to time one could hear a screech in the distance. And it was a creepy sort of place, and he ventured cautiously inside the cave, and the cave was frozen solid, and the exterior seemed a bit familiar, and his draconic face reflected over the surface, and in a large clearing the dragon Mordred lay lazily hibernating, and he crawled up with his head, and he poked his eye open. Tup, tup, tup. Mordred yawned and opened one of his eyes, and frowning he said, "Ahi, how did you find me?" "Flew around in circles until I caught your scent," he said while crawling up Mordred's horns. "That's all you, and you went to a lot of trouble to find me. What do you want?" asked Mordred, falling asleep again. And Mordred frowned again when he noticed that he was nibbling on one of the horns in his head, biting his horn. Mordred sat up and he shook his head until he stopped biting on his horn. And he splattered against the wall, and then he started gesticulating with his hand, and from time to time he would fly in circles around Mordred, and Mordred gave a sideways look and said, "What? You can't be serious." "Dead serious. So are you coming to the party?" "Or not, please," said he, smiling. And Mordred took a deep breath, which made a cold wind come from out of his nostrils. And he then took out 2 invitations, and Mordred compacted into his human form, and as he landed before Mulder and handed him the invitation, Mulder led the scene through a hole which had been hidden behind his large frame, and he followed behind. And it was interesting to know Mulder had human apartments beside his draconic cave, and it seemed more habits died hard, and the islands were made of wood, and the bed and drawers and the little tables were all carved from a single piece of wood, and he could not find any nails that bounded anything. So like he just hand carved it in his human furniture in like his dragon form. So he doesn't need any nails because he carved it out from a solid piece of wood. For the mattress, the bed had polar belt and wolf belt stacked on top of each other, and Mother opened a drawer and took out wolf belt robes, and the hood had a wolf head, and the attire was simply worn out of decency's sake, and the robes were cut short a little below the knees, and these showed Mulder's bare feet, and his arms too were exposed, and all human habits were indeed hard to kill. And Mulder handed he a chair before lighting a torch, and the torchlight reflected on the hard surface cave, and he noted that further he went, the hotter the interior got, and the walls had even a faint fiery veins. And Mulder noticed the direction that he was looking at, and he explained, "A volcano." "Where's Brunhilde?" asked he. "In town," said Mulder. "These cold-frosted mountains bore her, and I visit her every so often to make certain that she has not gotten eaten or into too much problem. The people in this land are strange, and I do care not much to get to know them." "So, are you guys coming?" asked he. "We'll see," said Mulder noncommittally. And Mulder read the invitation over the top. If it wasn't for his mastery of script, Mulder wouldn't have been able to make sense of what he called calligraphy. And he left Mulder's refuge, and he went to the Pharaoh dragons forward, and he gave up an invitation to 5 of the little Pharaoh dragons. And the largest of the king to be invited was his old playfellow, and the others were exemplary no larger than a German shepherd. And the Pharaoh dragons had no concept of invitations or birthday, and it took many hours for he to explain this concept, which even he barely understood. Calling it quits, he went to deliver the final letters, and he went to the nearest crossroad and released additional invitations in the wind, and these letters were then spirited away, and he looked towards the horizon, and night was falling very fast, and he had planned to finish his errand in one day, and he was down to just 2 letters. And he flew in the direction of the falling sound, and by the twilight he arrived at the beach, and the beach was located in the far western part of the continent, and it had immaculate white sand. And below the shadow of the large cliffs, 2 persons were looking at the sunset, and the figures stood on the hard rocks, and it was only on this spot where there were any rocks visible at the beach. And as twilight descended, a slight mist covered the ocean, and the sun had made the sunset appear colder and more lifeless. And he landed behind and assumed his human form, and one person was slightly taller than the other, and both wore frock coats. Upon closer inspection, he recognized the smaller gentleman as his brother Monkey King, and the tail and the wooden staff were a dead giveaway, and the person behind him was Marduk, and he was wearing a black noble outfit, and this time he was speaking with the human Marduk, and his human form did not differ much from his true self, and the eyes and hair were black as night, and his skin was a healthy tan color instead of his usual ghostly paleness, and unlike his true form, this body had short hair. And without looking at him, Marduk said, "You don't need my permission, you're a big boy, do as you will." And he gave Marduk a sideways look before whimpering. And he walked timidly towards Marduk, and he took his brother's hand and placed an invitation inside. And Marduk suddenly turned around and shook him by the shoulders, and then he said, "Don't you see?" Marduk's human eyes changed to a strange cyan color, and he lowered his gaze, trying his best not to look into his brother's eyes. And his eyes watered a little, and he almost seemed about to cry when his expression changed into a grimace. And then he said to Marduk in a harsh voice, so unlike himself, "I am a the powerhouse. What kind of fool do you take me for? Yes, I have seen, and I know damn well what your vision means." And Marduk was taken aback by his hostile reaction. And Monkey King stepped between them, and he separated them, and then he said to Marduk, "I thought we had discussed this already." And Marduk started walking away in a fury, and then he stopped for a moment and tore off his invitation before departing. And he shook his fist at Marduk, and then snarled when he saw this, and Monkey King lowered his brother's fist, and then he said, "He means well." And he lowered his fist and he sat down to soak, and Monkey King sat down beside him, and he rested his head against his shoulder while he waited for his tantrum to pass. Monkey King noticed a movement from the corner of his eye, and this made him grin and start to giggle, and then he put his hand toward his ear and said, "Look, see?" And he turned around and he saw Marduk picking up the torn pieces of the invitation, and this made he smile. Marduk smiled back at his brother, and he waved, and then he said more to himself, "Don't depend too much on anyone in this world." Today was Eleanor's birthday party, and Adi had done his best to make things go smoothly, and he had put into Eleanor's mind that she was entitled to do whatever she felt like in her birthday, and on this day Eleanor spent it playing outside like a little rascal, and it was almost a complete regression to her olden years before she was unfortunate enough to meet Undine. And since she was a cute little vixen, her little antics were passed off as adorable. And since he was always beside her, no one dared to say anything rude, and even if they did not say anything, they thought horrible things about her. And in one day, all of her charm had faded away, and two, then she was just another cretin. And as far as humans were concerned, no amount of grooming could cure her of her malady. And he was well aware of other thoughts, and this was not enough to set the poor lad fuming. And when it came to Eleanor, he was merciless, and when Eleanor was not looking, he was not on anyone that would dare sing bad things about Eleanor. And since Eleanor had never had a birthday party before, Yaga was able to safely arrange it in a way to keep his thumb down. And by putting the hour by dinner, Yaga was able to have a birthday dinner party instead of the last mess he orchestrated. And as long as the seats were full, Eleanor would be happy. And at this hour, all of the guests were arriving, and he and Eleanor greeted them as they came in. Eleanor had cleaned out from head to toe, and she was wearing a baby blue dress, and he had a cute white ribbon over her chest, and her shawl was shimmering white with golden borders. And despite being a happy occasion, Eleanor noticed that he was not himself, and a dark shadow was clouding his brow. To match Eleanor's dress, he sported a baby blue noble outfit, and it came with a blue cape and black hat. And whenever a wind would pass by, his blood red hair would swirl with it. And the first guests to arrive were the little feathered dragons, and they worked like clockwork right down to the millisecond. And the first one was his playfellow, and he noticed his presence by the tail he felt behind as he moved through the cornfield, and he went outside and he saluted the dragon approaching, and the dragon's red eyes first shifted from a he to the matter back to a he, and he removed his camouflage to allow Eleanor to see him. Eleanor did her best to contain her excitement, and the only people not in the mood were the elves working in the field, and the thing had trampled over all of their crops, and to add to the annoyance, the dragon spitted out slush before him, and this caused a good number of the crops to wither and immediately die, and it even made the land partly inarable. And he snorted through the slush, and he picked out a baby blue sapphire the size of a fist, and he sucked the grime of the sapphire and polished it to its premium luster over his shoulder, and then he held it in his claw and gingerly placed it inside Eleanor's hand. The girl was beaming with happiness, and she had never seen such a shiny jewel, and the dragon lay down on the field and rested his head on his foreclaw. And judging by his attitude, I guess he wanted to see if Eleanor was going to eat the jewel or not. Oh yeah, because like dragons they eat gems, so then he gave to a little human a gem and said like, here's your present, and then he'd be like, so are you gonna eat the present I gave you? But like humans can't digest precious stone, but well the dragon doesn't know that. And why isn't she eating it? And he said to Eleanor, don't be rude, at least take a pretend bite, otherwise we will never get him to live. Eleanor held the sapphire as if it was an apple and took a pretend bite. The dragon smiled at Eleanor and he started to leave, and before going quietly into the night, he gave a vicious look which shriveled the child to dust. And after he left, the little baby feather dragons made their entrances, and one brought 2 rubies, and another brought a dead rabbit, and 1 fibrous, and the last one had the hand of a human. So he'd be like, look, I brought a present, and like he brought to a human the hand of a human. Here, I brought food. They were all equally disappointed that Eleanor did not like their gift, and they were left in the same foul mood as their elder, only to come back 5 minutes later after smelling the food. And he beckoned the dragons to return within, and once they were seated or assembled inside, he went outside and he sat in a couch outside the portico, and Eleanor sat beside him, and she rested her head on her fist in imitation of a hint, and then she said, She then hugged Ahi and she kissed him on the cheek, and did not change his tone but disposition, and then she said, "Come on, it's a party, smile." And Ahi gave Eleanor a sad melancholy smile, and the smile was echoed by the genuine article. And Marduk entered the scene in his human form, and he was followed by the brother Monkey King. And they were both wearing the same attire they had worn back at sea. And he got up and he saluted his brother as they came, and the pair gave the maids the invitation. And Monkey King waved at Ahi sadly, and Marduk simply went inside without looking at his little brother. And Monkey King wandered over to Eleanor, and he kissed her hand, and then he said, "Pleasure to meet you, Eleanor." Eleanor giggled and blushed, and then she said to Ahi, "What a nice little monkey. Ahi, and when am I going to meet your family?" "Ahi and I are twins," said the Monkey King, smiling sadly, and he turned Ahi around and stood beside her, and gleamingly he said, "Don't we look alike?" Eleanor gave the pair a sideways look before saying, "But aren't we supposed to look alike?" Monkey King said, "We used to look alike before the warranty expired." "What's a warranty?" asked Eleanor thoughtfully, and then she added, "Can it happen to me too?" "A warranty is the time it takes for something to stop working properly," explained Monkey King. "Ah, so it's like aging. Do people age differently?" asked Eleanor thoughtfully. And he then said to Eleanor, petting her head, "Don't worry your pretty little head about it. Do not forget, we are not human." "Ah, yes, I sometimes forget we are not human," said Eleanor, assuming that not being human also applied to her. Monkey King frowned, and he placed his arm around his shoulder, and he led Ahi a few meters away up from the portico before saying, "What have you been telling her? My duke is going to kill me at this rate." And he smiled before saying, "Over my dead body." Monkey King shook his head before saying, "Aye, kid, you shouldn't go outside without a helmet." And he gave Monkey King a sideways look before saying, "Sure. I'd rather instead of a helmet, I have a hat, so it's cool." Monkey King gave a deep sigh and then removed his hat and coat, and he handed them to the nearest servant and then went within. And he watched his brother go inside, and Monkey King was never arm's length away from his staff, and his peers even imagined that his hand was glued to his magic staff. And he found Marduk conversing with one of the servants. And he stayed outside with Eleanor to greet the rest of the guests, and the ones who followed were the berserkers and the invited outlays, and both groups entered in a sort of parody of a somber procession, and the elves were to the left, marching beside the berserkers to the right, and the elves wore elegant white robes, and the maidens' hair was decorated with flowers, as were their costumes, and the berserkers were wearing their uniforms instead of their armors. And they were reminiscent of French uniforms, all designed by Bergman, and kind of creepy if you think about Bergman was always surrounding himself by historical anachronisms. And the strange marching group gave a proper rehearsal salutation before they went inside, and they left kiss with the slave as was doing proper. And after they went inside, Eleanor said to Ahi, "Everyone's here, let's go in." "There are still 3 due to come, and I want to stay here and wait for them," said Ahi. "You don't have to do this, Ahi. If they couldn't come, then they couldn't come. Don't fret over it," said Eleanor, taking his hand to lead him inside. Ahi walked with her to the front door before stopping, and then he said, "They're coming." "How can you tell us?" Eleanor straining her eyes to look at the darkness. Ahi simply shrugged his shoulder in response, and according to our observation, there was a 99% chance that the others would not come. Still, he insisted told him that they would come, and the pair waited outside for 10 minutes, and eventually Yago went outside to see what was keeping the birthday girl, and he asked Eleanor, "What's keeping you guys? The guests are starting to get hungry, especially the big dragons." "And he says more people are coming," responded Eleanor. "You can wait for them inside," retorted Yago, "and we'll save a plate for them and keep the meal warm. It is unfair to the other guests to wait for latecomers." Eleanor started to depart and was disappointed to know that he was still waiting, and he pouted his lips and snorted. And Marduk, who went outside, noticed his eye trembling, and he said to Ahi, "My brother, if it must go your way, allow me to send for them." And Marduk took out a pocket watch, and instead of looking at the time, he kept it close and gazed about his own reflection. And he only did this for a second before putting it away, and a cold wind swept over the fields, and he raised his hand to salute the approaching figure. Only Ahi and Marduk and the elves noticed that the figure materialized out of thin air. And the figure had appeared at the crossroads of the field, and the air had come in 4 directions, meeting at the center. And the figure wore a long white dress which seemed to float around her, and her face was covered by strands of her long pitch-black hair, and Karina threw her hair back as the rope settled down, and since it was a party, Karina had fixed herself up in a fashion that would make her less creepy, and she started by throwing back her white robes. And below her she wore an elegant dress with a V-cut shape and decorated with frills and just about every beautiful shiny bauble in her hands, necks, and feet. And whenever she walked, she would make jingling sounds, like cause like her bling bling jiggles, like makes lots of ting 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 sound. When she was not satisfied, to complete her look, she brushed her delicate pale hands over her jet black hair, and she brushed it all over to make it curly, and then she bit her delicate lips to give them a color, and when she was satisfied with her look, she decided to leave the shadow. And Jack was the first human to notice Karina, and she said to Ahi, "Look, someone's coming." Eleanor commented, "What a strange getup." And Karina was a strange sort of beauty, and she had a small forehead, thick, evenly shaped eyebrows, and large almond-shaped eyes, and a long aquiline nose and mouth round the chin. And all the strength combined to give her a mysterious semblance. And Karina waved her hand in salutation with much enthusiasm, and she walked the stairs, and she said to him, "It's nice to see you, little brother. Is she the one?" And he nodded in response, and Karina laughed, and then she said to Marduk, now I see why this birthday is so important." "Indeed," said Marduk, not too amused. "Are you really going to allow this?" asked Karina, chuckling. "If anything happens, it will be Monkey King's fault. Worst comes to worst, we do what we have to. We have a contingency plan," answered Marduk, narrowing his eye. And Karina decided not to press her brother to reveal what his so-called contingency plan. Marduk probably was lying about the existence of this plan, cause he tended to wing most things. Marduk gathered Karina inside, and only 2 more chess pieces were missing from the board. And if they came, knowing Ahi, the child would be forced to fetch them. And Eleanor lingered a bit longer with Ahi, waiting for the last 2 guests, and eventually she went inside. And Ahi gave another worldly screech, which was then echoed by the feral dragons of the forest. Alright, so then that's the that chapter.